Are you in your studio in Wales?
Yes, I have. As you can see, I have a little sort of converted barn that I use as a studio. It's usually a photographic studio, but I thought, well, why not put some set dressing in the back and just instead of having it's usually a bookshelf, isn't it, and half a picture.
Right.
But I thought, I'd just sort of make it different.
Well, wouldn't expect anything less with your experience as a photographer and all your background in the film industry. You used to be a focus puller, is that right, in the film industry?
Yeah, focus puller. Yes, basically, I had to keep the actors in focus. So I was paid a lot of money to stop Sean Connery looking like a great big pink bath sponge. Essentially, what I had to do. But it's slightly tricky because you can't look through the camera. So you actually have to do it with a tape measure, which I still have just there, with a tape measure, and marks on the floor. So it's quite complex, but it was very challenging, very interesting, challenging job, and a ringside seat at the movies because I was the closest person to the action. The cameraman and the director, they're all staring at a screen, but the focus puller right at the front.
When you describe it, you think, wow, that's really out there. But as you read it, you have a knack in all of your books that you're able to make something that's absurd, like we call it absurdist reality, right? It's absurd, and yet the way that you write and the similes and metaphors that you use and the cultural references, you can see yourself in the book's pages almost. Is that one of your hallmarks, that it has to feel like it's something that you could be a part of?
Yeah, I think writing fantasy books, I set them in the present day, and everything about the world seems very familiar, apart from this sort of one specific thing. And whether it's about people who can travel into books, or that humans hibernate, or they can see different colors, or that you have rabbits walking amongst you. The rest of the world is kind of real, and it's very very recognizable and very familiar. And I think that's really important when you're writing sort of whatever it's called, science fantasy or absurdist fiction or whatever, is because then the reader, I think, has something to kind of lock into and say, no, this is a real world. The suspension of disbelief is not kind of up here. It's kind of maybe a bit down here. And I kind of do it, I hope, in a kind of slow way. And these sort of facts about the rabbits are kind of revealed in a sort of nice, slow way in which the reader is not suddenly lost.
And I went back, in a sort of forensic way, looking at how I wrote, and I came across this notion of the narrative dare. And all my books have this central narrative dare that I never let myself off the hook, and then I have to explain it.
And
okay.
Why or what if?
Why? Humpty Dumpty is a murder mystery. He's been murdered. Explain. Right.
Yeah.
In The Fourth Bear, why was the porridge at different temperatures when it was poured at the same time?
Right.
And add that to that. Why were Mummy Bear and Daddy Bear sleeping in separate beds? All narrative dares. If Jane Eyre was kidnapped out of Jane Eyre, who would get her back and why? Why is she being kidnapped? And all these books have some sort of narrative dare.
Have you ever
to make them work?
Gone back on a narrative dare and had it and then gone not worth it?
No.
Okay.
No. And I
so you've seen it through.
Yeah, and that's vital importance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I was writing short stories, which was really my training ground, what I did is I gave myself more and more bizarre narrative dares on the basis, this is a theory, is there is no idea too stupid that you can't write it and write it well. No idea that's not too stupid. Silly is good, sort of stupid bad, and I kind of teeter on the knife edge sometime. But I did a story once about a man who turns into a banana, right? Okay, that was the narrative dare. Now that is stupid, okay? That can't work, or can it? And the thing about not letting yourself off the hook with a narrative dare is you start rummaging deeper in the toolbox, the authorial toolbox, if you like, and you can pick out all kinds of interesting things, like the reader's expectation and sort of smoke and mirrors and all those sort of wonderful ideas that you can
so you don't
bring
spend
up.
a lot of time going, nah, it probably wouldn't work.
No, I generally say, no, this can work. Okay, let's create a sort of a world order based on visual colour. Okay, how's that going to work? Well, I don't know. I just started on it, and then all of a sudden, 2.5 years later, this book,
a caste system, a hierarchy.
yeah, and all of a sudden it sort of started working, and it's quite difficult. But and then I thought, right, okay, I'm going to have a lead male, a beta male. I like right, my male leads are generally beta males. I think they're kind of interesting. And I've got to have it's a first-person narrative in a very strange world that he is uninterested about. And this is kind of a challenge. But when you have challenges, then you can pull the rabbit out of the hat more because you're trying harder to make it work.
Yeah.
So giving up on a narrative dare actually is counterproductive.
Right.
Because what you're essentially saying is you're letting yourself off the hook and do something much easier.
Yeah.
And then
doing the same old thing rather than pushing yourself.
Absolutely. And then you're going down the Me Too route.
Yeah. So keeping it original.
So it did take you 12 years to get the first book published.
Yeah.
What were I imagine you had a life before that. What was your background?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, that was it. That was all of it.
I just popped into existence.
That's it. So what was your background like to lead you to wanting to write?
Well, it's strange. Strange background, actually. Oddly enough, I'm completely academically unqualified to be an author, which is perhaps actually quite. For anyone who's trying to write and perhaps hasn't gone to university or anything like that, don't worry. You don't need to. I did it, so can you. It's quite easy. It just takes a lot more perspiration. No, I left school at 18. That was it. I joined the film industry. I worked for nearly 20 years in the film industry. And about halfway through my tenure in films, I started writing short stories, essentially as treatments to scripts that I was going to write, but then didn't. Because I kind of fell in love with the written word and the whole prose thing. Just started writing short stories with odd narrative dares, and I wrote about 20 short stories. One of them was about, I thought, here's a good funny idea. Humpty Dumpty is murdered and somebody's responsible. So, and that was just taking this one idea, this narrative dare as I call them, and I expanded that into 100,000 words and having a bit more fun with it. It's not just about Humpty Dumpty, it's about a lot of things. It's basically taking the tired crime genre and sort of putting a mirror up to it and saying how daft it is, but how fun it is as well. So anyway, so that's what I did basically in the film industry. Then I started writing. When I wasn't working on a film, I was working on a book. And eventually, after 7 books and 12 years, I finally found an agent. Yeah, that was 12 years ago. Yeah.
How did you pitch it to them? The same way that we just talked about? How do you do that?
Well, yeah, I just did those 60-word pitches. I knew I wasn't under any illusion about how hard it would be, and I knew it was difficult with my books. In fact, there was a point the first book I wrote was The Big Over Easy. Originally, it was called Who Killed Humpty Dumpty, because I thought I could sell it on the title alone. How naive was I? So that was my first book. Then I wrote a sequel to a book I couldn't get published. Strategy, not a strong point, obviously, which was The Fourth Bear. That was the second book I wrote, and I thought those were really going to work. I really thought they would sell, and they didn't. I just got rejections. No one even read them. They just said, "Sounds like a stupid idea. Forget it." When I went, no, I think these are good. I want to know why the porridge was at different temperatures when it was poured at the same time, because it doesn't make any sense to me. And why Mummy Bear and Daddy Bear were sleeping in separate beds. That doesn't make any sense either. And clearly this is a story that needs to be told. An enigmatic blonde who goes missing. If that's not a mystery thriller, I don't know what is. So anyway, who trashes the house? No, but what happened was that I think librarians and English teachers got hold of it, and they went, "Yes, this book is for us. We love it," and they were like getting everyone to read it. And this buzz kind of developed, in the US, and it got on to number 6 or 7 on the New York Times bestseller list, which for a debut author, a British debut author, it is quite remarkable, especially when you consider that it's a book that has Jane Eyre, time travel, dodos, vampires, werewolves, and an interesting digression on the authorship of the Shakespeare plays. All in one, and everyone was going, I don't understand how this book can actually get published at all, let alone get to number 5 or 6 on the New York Times bestseller list. So anyway, I was delighted, and thank you to librarians everywhere.
Do you write every day?
Yes.
Is it like a job?
It is very much like a job. In fact, I work harder now than I did ever before.
Is it supposed to work that way?
No,
I always
no,
thought
no, it's not. No,
You're
it's-
supposed to be like Stuart Woods and buy a plane.
It's,
and do all that
yeah,
stuff?
you're meant to do. Yeah, I don't know. I think how it's meant to work really is that you write one book and it's a phenomenal success, and you get trillions of dollars, and then you write another one about 9 years later that's rubbish, and you earn only like $500 billion, and then you spend the rest of the time having a great time. I mean, that's how I thought it worked, but it isn't like that at all. You have to work really hard and bring out a book every year. Yeah, each book usually takes, the exception of Shades of Grey, my Shades of Grey, of course, or as we call it, 49 fewer Shades of Grey. Not 49 less Shades of Grey. That wouldn't be good English. That one took me nearly 2 years. It took a long time to write that one.
And do you? You have to plot this out. I mean, it's
no, I don't.
it just
No.
it just comes
It just
out.
spews
The whole
out.
different world, the alternative.
Yes, I'm sorry. Everyone is really surprised by this, and in fact, I let the cat out of the bag years ago because it's far easier to tell the truth than lie, because then you have to have a good memory. It's very hard. So no, I don't plot at all. What I do is I have my little narrative dares I mentioned earlier, but otherwise, thank you. But otherwise, very impressed by the narrative idea. No, I I have some notions in my head about where I think it should go, and I have some themes I want to exploit. But for the most part, I just start writing, and then things slot into place. And if they don't work, I rewrite them. And if they do work, then I go, yeah, that's okay. And then I'll be on some chapter 4 or something, and then I'll have a really good idea, and I'll go, I have to go back to the beginning and bring in the new idea. And it just goes along like that, sort of right, and I get to the sort of narrative horizon, as I call it, and then I sort of stall, and then I go back to the beginning again. I go, oh, I know where it's going to go. But the great thing about doing what I do, and the sort of slightly fast and loose with facts and being reverently irreverent, as I call it, with the classics, is that for the most part I can sort of find a small nub of truth, and then sort of twist it to my own nefarious purposes. In the same way as I treat sort of physics and science and stuff like that.
Twist it around.
Yeah, just twist it around to make it totally impossible. And I get emails from physicists who say things like, well, actually, Mr. Ford, but the idea about having a world on the inside of a globe, it isn't possible. And I usually email back with a kind of it depends on the tone of them. If it's a kind of jokey tone, I send back a little certificate I have, which is a certificate of pedantry. Which they can hang on their wall, and they do. They email me back saying how happy they are to receive that, because it all looks very official, and from the University of Pedantry of Mid Wales. No, and I send emails back saying, is that the only mangling of physics that you found? You missed a huge amount.
Now, how many series do you have going right now?
I think it's 4 at the last.
You have 4 series, and
yes, and I can't seem to finish any of them.
I was going to.
Yeah, I apologise to everybody.
Do you have a favorite? Is that like choosing which child you like best?
No, that's easy.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what.
That's
Yeah, I mean, when you got your children, yes, I mean, I have twins. And people say, oh, what's like having twins? I go, it's fine. You just figure out which is your favourite, and then there's no problem. No. In case there are any of my children here, check. I've got quite a few. So. No, I don't know really. I mean, I sort of love them all dearly. They are like children, really. I do like the nursery rhyme series, nursery crime series, and I'm sort of a bit annoyed that sort of the rest of the world has caught up with me on that, because I'd still like to write the number 3. But everyone's doing, Puss in Boots and Humpty Dumpty and all that kind of stuff, and it's just very done at the moment.
just on.
Yeah, so I'll leave it. Yeah, and the Grimm, isn't it? And the next one, I've heard from my publishers that there's going to be a sort of fusion of sort of Grimm and 50 Shades of Grey. So we're going to.
No.
Yeah, so we're going to see erotic nursery rhymes. Not from me. Not from me. And I don't know how it evolved. That's the wonderful thing about the fun I have with writing, is that I have a vague idea what the book's going to be about, but until I start writing it and letting it evolve and darken and spread like fungus, I really don't know what it's going to be like. It's exciting. If ever you pick up a Jasper Fford book and you go, I have no idea how this is going to turn out, don't worry, neither did I. And I hope it shows, actually. I hope it shows.
There was the Thursday Next, when you wrote the Era Fair, was that supposed to be a standalone or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Read it now; it's completely a standalone. There's nothing about the book world in it. There's, it just finishes up. They get married happily ever after. End of. And when I was pitching it, or rather when my agent was pitching it to Hodder in the UK, they just asked me. I went up for a meeting, and they just asked me, is there a sequel? And of course, and I thought, well, I better say yes. I'm not going to say no. I reject your publishing deals. And I said, oh yes, like this. Yes, of course there is. And they went, oh really? What's it called? And I went, thinking, on my feet. I kind of went, oh, it's called Lost in a Good Book. And they went, oh, well, that sounds like a good title. And what's it about? And then I just made something up about the book world and this policing agency, and it was like, oh, that's quite a good idea. And they went terrific, and they offered me a 2-book deal straight away. So no, it was just a standalone, in the same way that Last Dragon Slayer was a standalone. The Big Over Easy, that was a standalone, but I wrote a sequel to it as well because it just seemed fun to play with that world. All my books start off as standalone.
So you just never know. You never know what'll happen with the Constant Rabbit.
Never say never.
For now, Fford fans could look forward to some upcoming series finales of his other books. Jasper's currently working on a final Dragon Slayer book, then a sequel to Shades of Grey, and a final 8th book to the beloved Thursday Next series.
It's going to be quite fun, getting to know her again, and she'll be, of course, a little bit older, as she always is in all the books. And yeah, I see her running a bookshop somewhere, or maybe being a librarian somewhere in retirement, and she gets sort of called in, perhaps one last, you've got to go back to the book world, all hell's breaking loose. Oh no, I'm done with that. So a bit of a sort of reluctant hero stuff. And it's going to be fun, but I'd like to round that series off as well, and just complete the series so they're all done, they're all finished, and then I can just go and carry on and do some other weird stuff that I'm kind of not even thinking about.